There are concept cars, there are vaporware prototypes, and then there's the Hyundai N Vision 74. A car that feels like it escaped from Back to the Future, joined a cyberpunk street racing league, and somehow convinced Hyundai's executives to greenlight it for testing in the real world. This thing shouldn't exist. Let me explain. Hydrogen hybrids, they're basically the unicorns of the automotive world. Everyone talks about them, nobody actually builds them, and when someone does, it usually ends up as a museum piece or a PowerPoint slide. But Hyundai walked into the room like, screw it. Let's build a hydrogen-powered DeLorean that can drift. Engineers were shocked. The industry was confused. Enthusiasts basically had a meltdown. And the internet lost its mind. Because this wasn't just another EV concept. This wasn't a look at our sustainable pod press release. This was Hyundai saying, we're tired of physics telling us what we can't do. A hydrogen fuel cell and battery hybrid, 680 plus horsepower to the rear wheels, torque vectoring straight out of a track weapon, and wrapped in a body that looks like someone modded a 1970s Giugiaro sketch in Unreal Engine 5. It's innovation versus reality. A car that feels nostalgic, futuristic, impossible, and inevitable all at the same time. And by the end of this video, we're going to answer the question everyone keeps asking. Is the N Vision 74 just a beautiful fever dream? Or is it actually the future Hyundai is brave enough to build? Let's break it down. 1974 meets 2074, and somehow it works. The N Vision 74 doesn't look modern for the sake of modern. It looks modern because it's reaching backward and forward at the same time. And that's why people connect to it instantly. This shape didn't come from nowhere. It came from Giugiaro's 1974 Pony Coupe, a concept Hyundai never put into mass production, but it became one of those lost chapter designs that quietly influenced an entire era of wedge-shaped futurism. The vents and aero channels aren't fake either. This car doesn't dress up like a track weapon. It is one. Functional. Side intakes feeding cooling loops. Rear aero channels managing heat and downforce. Low slung diffuser controlling stability. Wide stance planted for grip and confidence. And then there's the emotional side. People love this car not because it's flashy, but because it's restrained. It speaks in angles, not noise. It shows power by being calm. It looks futuristic without being cartoonish and nostalgic without being dated. It's the kind of design that hits the human brain on two levels. Recognition. I feel like I've seen this before. Awe. But I've never seen it like this. That is why the N Vision 74 resonates. It feels like it belongs to a timeline we didn't get. A version of automotive history where the wedge era never died, and the future kept evolving in straight lines and sharp geometry instead of melting into blobs and bubbles. This design tells a story before it ever moves. Now let's talk about what powers it and why Hyundai went in a direction most manufacturers won't even touch. Power from the future, delivered like nothing else on the road. If the design of the N Vision 74 feels retro future, the power system is straight up science fiction running in real life. Hyundai didn't just throw a fuel cell into a sports car for bragging rights. They built a hybrid power ecosystem that solves the problems battery EVs haven't cracked, especially for track use. Let's break it down. 85 kilowatt fuel cell stack. The heart that never stops beating. The N Vision 74 carries an 85 kilowatt hydrogen fuel cell stack under the hood. That stack isn't just an alternative to a battery, it's a generator. While you drive, it constantly creates power by combining hydrogen and oxygen, silently, smoothly, and with a thermal footprint so low it almost feels unfair compared to the overheated EVs sweating in pit lane. This is energy on demand, endless, stable, predictable power. Continuous energy generation, the part EVs are jealous of. Pure EVs have a simple rule. The faster you go, the faster you drain. But the N Vision 74 flips that script. Its fuel cell stack continuously feeds power to the system. You're not just pulling from the battery, you're replenishing it while driving. This means the car doesn't get tired, and that's a huge deal. The car carries 2 hydrogen tanks stored at extremely high pressure. Hyundai engineered them with motorsport safety standards, rigid shells, multi-layer carbon protection, and emergency shutoff valves. Hydrogen is misunderstood, but the reality is it has safer dispersion in open air, no liquid fire risk, instant venting, and is extremely stable when contained properly. It's not the ticking time bomb movies pretend it is. Hyundai built these tanks to survive impacts that would rupture most gasoline systems. Here's the cheat code. Refueling hydrogen takes about 5 minutes. Charging an EV doesn't. On the track, that's the difference between EV team. Shut it down, boys. 45 minutes to get back to 60%. Hydrogen team, grab a drink. The car's ready again. This is where hydrogen shines, not in daily commutes, but in performance and endurance scenarios. EVs have 2 enemies on track. 1, heat, 2, charge time. Push an EV hard and you get battery heat, motor heat, inverter heat, power limits, thermal throttling, reduced output, longer lap times, and mandatory cooldowns. The N Vision 74 answers with cooler energy generation, separate cooling loops, instant refuel, stable power delivery, and no thermal choking. EVs get tired, this doesn't. The fuel cell doesn't care how hard you push, it just keeps feeding power into the system like a futuristic IV drip. Hydrogen isn't here to replace EVs, it's here to fix the performance scenarios EVs aren't designed for yet. And the N Vision 74 is Hyundai's way of showing we know how to do batteries, we know how to do fuel cells, and we know the future might need both. This car is a lab on wheels, a proof of concept for a world where endurance and instant refuel performance matter just as much as raw battery capacity. Electric drive architecture, the future hidden under the retro skin. This is where Hyundai quietly flexes. From the outside, the N Vision 74 looks like it drifted out of a 1970s sci-fi storyboard. But underneath the pixel headlights and razor-edge symmetry is a drive system that feels like someone time-traveled forward, stole blueprints from 2050, and brought them back for a concept car they never expected the public to see. Because this isn't just another EV. This is a dual-motor, rear-wheel drive, torque vectoring monster built on a layout that feels more like a Group B rally fever dream than a clean corporate prototype. Hyundai went with twin independent motors at the rear, one for each wheel, giving the car a level of precision that feels impossible for a machine this angular and nostalgic. It's the kind of setup where drifting isn't just allowed, it's practically a user interface. And then there's the battery. A low, wide, slab-style pack that sits like a spine across the chassis, tuned not for efficiency, not for range, but for what the N Division has quietly become obsessed with: emotion. response, human conductivity. This entire system is designed to translate intent into motion with zero lag. You twitch, it moves, you breathe on the accelerator, and the rear end has a philosophy discussion with physics. The hydrogen fuel cell keeps the battery fed. The battery keeps the motors violent. And the motors keep the car alive in a way that feels uncomfortably close to the retro future fantasies people wrote about 50 years ago. Thermal management, the hidden war inside the machine. If the N Vision 74 were a living organism, the cooling system would be its circulatory system. A network of arteries and pressure chambers designed not to keep the car alive, but to keep it furious. Because here's the part most people miss. Hydrogen fuel cells run cool. High-performance electric motors do not. And battery packs, especially ones tuned for instant violence like this one, run hotter than the comment section of a Tesla versus Porsche debate. So Hyundai built something wild, a 3-channel thermal management system that treats heat like a rival to be outmaneuvered, not suppressed. You've got 1. The fuel cell loop. Keeps the stack in its optimal window so it can crank out power like a portable power plant. Cool, steady, predictable. The monk of the trio. 2. The battery loop. Aggressive cooling for the pack during repeated high-load bursts. This is the system that says, "You want another drift run? Fine. I'm not stopping you." 3. The motor and inverter loop. This is where the real war happens. Twin rear motors generating insane torque create heat spikes that would shut down lesser EVs. Hyundai's solution? Overbuilt radiators, oversized channels, and airflow mapping that treats the rear of the car like the engine bay of a rally legend. And here's the magic trick. All 3 systems run independently, yet communicate through a central control brain that balances them in real time. It's like watching 3 fighters in a ring, each handling their own battle, but adjusting their rhythm to support the others. Most concept cars don't bother with this level of engineering. They don't need to. They're movie props with LED signatures. The N Vision 74. This thing was built to drive, to overheat, to be pushed beyond the polite settings of a press event and into the realm of, are you sure it's safe to keep going? This is Hyundai hinting, no flexing, that behind the retro bodywork is a machine designed for sustained aggression, a cooling system built not for range, but for repetition, for laps, for heat-soaked chaos. This is where the N Vision 74 stops being a concept and starts being a threat. Driving dynamics. What it feels like to push the future. If the design is retro and the powertrain is experimental, the driving dynamics are the part that feel almost illegal. Because the N Vision 74 doesn't behave like a concept car. It behaves like a memory you've never had. Something pulled from an alternate timeline where the 80s never slowed down, and every engineer was raised on Group B footage and cyberpunk comics. Let's break down how it actually drives. You don't steer this car. You aim it. Give it throttle mid-corner, and the rear responds like a scene partner. Not snapping, not breaking loose, but pivoting, like it's anticipating the line before you choose it. This is the closest an EV has ever come to the emotional cadence of a turbocharged 80s legend. B, instant torque. Acceleration that punches first, explains later. When both motors fire and the battery gives everything it has, the car surges in a way that isn't clean or polite. It's violent, mechanical, almost analog in the way the rear end squats and the tires negotiate with physics. Hydrogen keeps the battery fed, and the battery keeps the motors angry. It feels like someone inserted an F1 KERS boost into a DeLorean drawn by Sid Mead. C. Weight distribution. The heavy car that doesn't feel heavy. Let's be honest, this thing is not light. There's a fuel cell, a battery pack, motors, tanks, pumps. But Hyundai pulls off a trick. They bury the mass low, centered, and wide. The result, you get a 4,300 plus pound machine that turns in like a car 1,000 pounds lighter. The center of gravity is so low it feels like the chassis is glued to a magnetic rail beneath the ground. It shouldn't work, but it does, beautifully. D. Braking and regen. Stopping power that feels cinematic. Regen is tuned aggressively, but in a way that complements the retro feel. Lift off the throttle and the rear hunkers down. It feels like downshifting a manual transmission in a sci-fi chase scene. The regen and mechanical brakes blend seamlessly, giving you the confidence to throw the car into corners with the same recklessness you'd have in an arcade racer. E. Overall experience. You don't drive it. You collaborate with it. This is the part reviewers struggled to describe, because the N Vision 74 doesn't feel like an EV or a hydrogen prototype or a concept car. It feels like something that shouldn't exist, a machine made for cinematic moments but tuned by people who love driving more than they love PR. It's the kind of car where every corner feels like a stunt rehearsal, every straight feels like a dare, every slide feels intentional, every throttle input feels personal. This isn't future mobility. This is future emotion. The N Vision 74 drives like Hyundai tried to build every poster car we imagined as kids, and then made it real. Why this car matters. The future didn't have to be boring. The N Vision 74 matters because it breaks a rule the industry quietly accepted, that the future has to trade excitement for efficiency. Hyundai refused that deal. This car proves you can chase innovation and keep the pulse of driving alive. It's hydrogen tech, electric muscle, and retro imagination, all in one machine that reminds people the future isn't a spreadsheet. It's supposed to make you feel something. The N Vision 74 didn't go viral because of its numbers. It went viral because it asked a better question. What if tomorrow can still thrill us? That's why it matters. Not because it's practical, but because it's proof that someone out there still believes the future should have a heartbeat. And maybe that's the real legacy of this car. A reminder that the most important innovations aren't always the ones that solve everything. They're the ones that make us want to keep dreaming. If you made it this far, you're officially part of the Future Minds crew. Drop a like if this car hit you the way it hit the rest of us. And subscribe if you want more retro future machines that shouldn't exist, but somehow do. This is artificial future, where tomorrow gets an explanation today.